Story 1. I don't watch late-night TV anymore. When I was 10, I wanted nothing more than to be allowed to stay up late. My parents put me to sleep at exactly 9 p.m. every night. Despite my protests, my body would betray me and I'd drift off to sleep. One night my mom and dad had a work event and let me stay home alone for the first time. I was beyond excited all week and finally the night came. They left at 8 and I ran to the kitchen to make myself some popcorn. I planned to have an all-night movie marathon with my stuffed animals. Everything went according to plan for the first couple of hours. I remember watching Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast on VHS. I decided to turn it off and switch to cable to watch the telenovela my mom would never let me watch. The phone rang and I went to the kitchen to go answer it. Then I remembered I was supposed to be asleep, so I turned around and headed back to the living room. When I looked back at the television, I realized it was on an infomercial instead of the show I had left playing. I went up to the TV set and messed with the buttons to switch the channel. Then I noticed something odd. All the channels were playing static except for channel 163. That stupid infomercial. They were selling some snake skin heels for old ladies. I made my way to the shelf where my Disney movie collection sat. As I had my back turned to the TV, I heard, "I can see you," in my dad's voice. I turned around quickly. But the infomercial was still on. I felt a wave of cold rush through my body. I didn't like being alone as much as I thought I would. Everything was eerie and quiet. And it was just me, darkness, and the TV. I was about to insert the VHS tape in when the TV started making beeping noises. It turned itself off. I decided that this was God's way of telling me to go to sleep. So I collected my stuffed animals in their basket and made my way to bed. About 5 minutes later, I heard the TV flicker on. "Are you freaking kidding me?" I muttered. I went back into the living room to go turn it off again. The infomercial was still on. I rolled my eyes. "Hey Lily, can I show you something cool?" the lady on the screen said. Except it was in a childish voice, the kind that would belong to a toddler. I yelped in surprise, unplugged the TV from the wall, made my way up the stairs and locked the door. Then I drifted off to sleep. I woke up in a cold sweat. Then I noticed I couldn't move. I was completely immobile. I sat limp on the chair, paralyzed. The only thing I could move was my eyes. I was frozen. I felt so trapped and scared. It was awful. I screamed as loud as I could, but nothing came out. In fact, my body made no effort to move whatsoever. I could barely breathe. My eyes focused on what was in front of me. My rear projection television. "Lily, I said I'd show you something cool." On screen there was a smiling audience shown. They clapped and clapped. They chanted my name. Then one by one the infomercial lady on stage called them by their names up to the stage. "Women and children first. Look how sharp this kitchen set is, tell your mommy and daddy to buy them from Niceway Knives." Each smiling audience member placed their head on the counter, and with a clean, swift motion from the infomercial lady their head rolled to the floor. I felt tears rolling down my cheeks. This continued for an hour or so. Till I felt my body regain movement. I got up from the chair and, hugging myself, I made my way back into my room. I couldn't fall back asleep till my parents got home. I gave them a huge hug and went to bed. I never did tell anyone what happened that night. And I forgot about the incident for the most part. I convinced myself it was some weird sleep paralysis. Till recently my dad came home with great news. He was to be the CEO of the company he works at. Niceway Inc. Story 2. Late Night Playground. I've been lurking here for a while, trying to decide whether to share my experiences too. I was staying over at a friend's house, we'll call her Jessie, one day, when I was about 16. She lived in a small town just down the road from the one I lived in the Napa Valley in California. Jesse's girlfriend, Hannah, was spending the night as well. The town had a curfew of 10 p.m., but for some reason we decided that we were going to go down to the elementary school playground. I remember being a little nervous as we made our way through the dark streets towards the school. Jessie had told me recently about seeing a little boy at the playground when she had gone alone one night. She said she could only see him out of the corner of her eye. When she looked directly toward him, he disappeared. Previous events in my life had made me a believer in ghosts and the paranormal, and I was trying to imagine how I would react if the little boy was there tonight. Everything was quiet at the school when we arrived, and we hurried down the walkway to the playground. The way the school was set up, the buildings were connected by covered walkways, and the playground was on the opposite side of a plus-shaped connection from the entrance. Off to the left the walkway went between two buildings, and I believe it was the same on the right. As soon as we reached the playground, it was like a weight came off us, and I realized all three of us had been tense creeping down the dark walkways. Out by the swings and jungle gym we were in the open, with moonlight and the ambient light from street lamps. The openness of it felt safe, and we ran for the swing set. Of course, three teenage girls couldn't keep their volume down if they tried, so we were constantly shouting and shushing each other by turns. Maybe that's the reason for what we heard, maybe we disturbed someone. About 15 minutes or so after we arrived at the playground, I was on one of the swings, trying to see how high I could get. I loved the feeling of starting to fall, and then feeling the chain snap tight as it caught my weight again. Suddenly my stomach dropped in a way that had nothing to do with the rise and fall of my swing. I glanced around, letting my momentum drop, wondering why I suddenly felt like I was doing something wrong. Yes, we were out after curfew, but this wasn't a sudden attack of goody two-shoes, and I wasn't worried about cops or our parents finding out. My skin was crawling and my stomach was twisting itself in knots. It was a feeling of wrongness. I felt like a trespasser. Like someone, or something, was watching us, and resented us being there. Jessie. My friend hopped down from the jungle gym when I called her name, and Hannah looked over. There must have been something in my voice. I let the swing's momentum take me as far forward as it would, and jumped, landing heavily and dropping to one knee. I remember noticing that I had ripped my best pair of jeans, which normally would have made me very upset, but at the time I didn't care. We need to leave. I don't know why. But we need to go. Now. My friend Jessie has told me about several times that she's seen things like the little boy I mentioned earlier. She also takes feelings very seriously. I told her what I was feeling, and she immediately agreed to leave. We huddled together in a tight knot and made our way back to the dark pathways. Just as we reached the plus we heard it. From our right, down that path that went between two school buildings, out of the pitch black, giggling. Clear as day, the sound of a little girl's high-pitched giggle, and the quick patter of tiny running footsteps. All three of us froze, and I think I yelled something, and then we were running. I've never been a great runner, but I think we were back at her house in under 5 minutes. I don't even remember the trip, just the adrenaline-fueled panic, and the vehement hatred of my love for horror movies. Story 3. If you get a late-night Amber Alert, it's probably best to ignore it. Beep. 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 Dreary eyes creaked open halfway and almost lifeless, gazing at the television screen that faced the rest of the living room. White and bold text against a black background as dark as night, subtle shadows formed around the coffee table and the edges of the couch from the screen's illumination. The piercing alarm echoed and blared through, that oh-so-familiar shriek of an emergency alert broadcast that shattered the night's blanket of tranquil silence. Each loud beep had its timely equal interval of a second before a long monotone alarm of a low and static frequency ringed through. "This shit again," I mumbled, realizing I had fallen asleep at the couch. The following message is being transmitted at the public request of the Washington State Department of Safety. This is an Amber Alert. Momentarily half asleep, a frown formed on my face as a wave of perplexed confusion rushed over that followed a sinking sense of dread. It was enough to send a jolt to my senses that erased the last of somnolence, and to think I heard the voice wrong, but there it was in plain, white, and foreboding text. Child abduction emergency. At 11:53 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, a young girl was taken from near her home in Colville. The girl is believed to be 7-year-old Anna Carter. She is 4 feet and 1 inch tall, white complexion, weighs 51 pounds, has black hair and brown eyes. She was last seen wearing a blue and pink floral dress with a red headband and white sneakers. Her abductor is believed to. The gruff and piercing voice of the announcer faded off into the background as my murky brain attempted to process the stream of information. An abduction, this late at night? A warm summer night would tempt the town's kids to spend the evening hours at the playground. But this late? I couldn't imagine what the parents were going through, and for the unfortunate set of circumstances to occur was horrifying enough. If the abduction was a few hours ago, then the girl was long gone from the town by then, as pessimistic it was to think that. Probably across the state by now. The broadcast ended as soon as it began, though the alarm remained to echo in my rattled mind even after I turned the television off. And heading up the stairs, I performed my usual nightly routine of washing my face as I readied for bed, letting the cool waters tame my swirling mind for once. I turned off my bedroom light and took one last gaze out the window. The neighborhood stood in deathly silence, an ordinary and lifeless scene in the darkest hours of the night. Faint outlines of evergreen trees towered in the far distance, barely illuminated by the stars shining like beacons. Much closer, street lamps casted their pools of light onto barren, gray roads. I almost glanced away for the bed, but I noticed subtle movement out the corner of my peripheral out the window. There were 2 individuals walking together on the sidewalk, revealed in yellow hue by the streetlights. An adult man and a young girl. Because of how a part of my roof juts out into a triangular prism, I had not noticed them until I adjusted my posture. The girl merrily skipped along with the man walking a few paces behind, and it would have been overall a sweet and charming scene if it wasn't almost 3 in the morning. And upon focusing on the blue flowery patterns on her pink floral dress, my heart slowly sank into the pit of my stomach. Her dark velvet headband reflected ominously under the dim lighting, revealing the child's darkened long hair that swayed as she skipped playfully. That had to be her. The girl from the Amber Alert, prancing innocently as if that man, the abductor, was her father. I'm not the one to make assumptions, but a scene like that in the dead darkness of the night raised all forms of suspicious alarms. I should have minded my own business. I turned away and grabbed my cell from the nightstand, promptly dialing 911 on the home screen to report a possible sighting of the girl. Only 5 seconds passed since I took my eyes off the 2, only 5 fucking seconds, and upon returning my gaze to the girl, I let out an audible gasp and I nearly dropped the phone. She was staring at me, along with the man now beside her. Frozen where they stood beneath the lamp, the eerie lighting casting upon dead, wide eyes, fixated directly into my own pupils, up into my second-story window. Massively wide eyes that seemed too disproportionate in comparison to their nose and mouth. My room was in complete darkness. How could they have noticed I was looking? I was so in shock and out of breath that I failed to hear the barely audible voice of a female dispatcher from my phone trying to get my attention. I took my eyes off the pair just briefly, stating my full name and home address before proceeding to answer the dispatcher about my concerns. As calmly as I could, I explained my sighting of the missing girl, describing her clothing that would match with the broadcast from earlier. When I took a glance back at the 2 to have a better look at the abductor, a massive wave of dread and disgust flooded past me. At the torso, the girl was now bent at a grotesque, sharp angle to the side while her arms were twisted past the capability of a normal elbow, as if she was a puppet loosely held by invisible strings from the heavens. Her head, however, was snapped upright and maintained the same fierce and wide stare into my eyes with those sunken, large, jet-black irises. Fucking both of them were in this inhuman, convoluted stance, gleaming their eyes into my fucking soul, just a longing fixed gaze with eyes as black as the sky above. "Hello, sir?" The dispatcher questioned through the phone, but I wasn't paying attention. I caught the sight of crimson blood leaking from their nose and ears in the faint light, before completely shutting the window with heavy drapes, and resuming my frantic tone with the dispatcher. Yeah. I still see them. I gulped with a subtle lie, my curiosity getting the best of me in trying to take the tiniest peek past the window. In the split-second glimpse, the pair had vanished. Vanished as quickly as they had spotted me. The police took notes on my descriptions of the girl and the unknown adult man soon enough, the pair long gone upon the cops' arrival. I explained the basis of what I saw, the descriptions and actions of the girl, the man sporting dark jeans and a white t-shirt alongside her, yet I refrained from mentioning the full details. The following days, there were sporadic alerts on the two's whereabouts, a few witness accounts that spotted them here and there. Any news of it dissipated, and the missing posters were scrapped. But that night I know I saw something that was absolutely inhuman, something not from this world, for after I had closed off the window and awaited the authorities, the image was forever burned in my mind, that along with her lifeless stare and vacant eyes, she was smiling. Not a smile of malicious intent, but almost a sincere smile to tell me she was somehow at peace. No trace of them was ever found, and anything I tried to follow up online yielded nothing. No talk of an Amber Alert the next morning in the local news, nor did anyone knew was added to a missing persons directory. I don't know what I saw that night, and I don't know what they were, how they picked up on me looking at them but seemingly refraining from harming me. My next approach would be to talk to some of my neighbors who may have been awake last night and seen the commotion, but all I know is that if they ever return, they know where the fuck I live. Story 4. I don't drive at night anymore. I don't drive at night anymore. At least I don't drive anywhere that isn't very well illuminated. I know that sounds silly, trust me when I say that my friends tease me to no end about it. They're the types that love going for late-night cruises out around the outskirts of town and to go stargazing, both activities that I enjoyed too once. That was until that one night. After that I couldn't bring myself out of the light ever again. It was about a year ago in late July. I was living in a small town at the time in northern Alberta, staying there to get the most out of the cheap community college and low rent. I had just finished my finals and was looking forward to visiting family out west for my week-long vacation. It wasn't exactly a short trip, a total of 4 hours at least just to even get to the next town over. To get to where my parents were was an additional 6 hours of travel. Driving through Alberta isn't exactly exciting either, not unless you enjoy wide open spaces and a lot of empty fields at least. It was about 4 a.m. when I got into my car. The bright idea to leave early that I had had the previous night was now leaving me bleary-eyed and full of regret. I headed over to the closest gas station and stocked up on the usual road trip supplies. Energy drinks, chips, pretty much anything that looked good at the time. The coffee I had brought with me was starting to kick in, and I began to look forward to at least the initial first few hours of the trip. That was typically how it was with long car rides for me. The first few hours were great and relaxing, with the rest of the trip just slowly getting worse as I got those fun cramps or stiffness in the body from sitting for so long. Before heading out of the city I checked my phone, queuing up my playlist of music that would be keeping me company and double-checking my route out of the city on Google Maps. Damn. A red bar sat halfway between me and where I was heading, construction ahead. Expected delay, 45 minutes. Great. That was just my luck that the main road itself was getting work done, but there wasn't anything I could really do about that. Finally pulling out of the gas station I headed out, starting my long journey. The music pulsed through the speakers as the light pollution of the city slowly faded behind me and the night sky grew ever brighter. It was a full moon out tonight, and one that complemented a sea of stars quite nicely too. That helped raise my mood up a bit, and I soon got lost in thought as I cruised down that dark road. After about an hour of driving down the open highway the sky seemed to quickly darken, the moon becoming obscured and the illuminated plains around me fading away to an inky black. The only thing that was visible now outside of my headlights were different twinkling lights off on the horizon and the city lights far behind still in my rearview mirror. The lights ahead pulsed between orange and reds with the occasional flash of a vehicle's headlights. That had to have been construction, I figured. It was another joy of driving out in these flat areas. You were able to see practically a full hour ahead of you in advance and just really take in all excitement. At night without the moon's glow it was a much different feeling than boring though. It kind of felt like you were driving through space itself, a massive black expanse all around you with only the different bits of light off in the distance showing any real signs of life. Almost as though the night sky itself had dripped down and enveloped the ground below. I cursed and shielded my eyes as someone passed me with a set of far too bright to be legal headlights, night vision being lost immediately. By the time I could actually see again, thankfully having not flown off the road, everything that wasn't in my headlights was just pitch black now. The edges of my car's headlight beams didn't seem to extend very far out either. Because of this I almost missed a pair of cars that were off the side of the road, hazard lights going on and off to try and warn me in advance. I slowed my vehicle to try and get a better look, in case they needed any help, but as I passed by I didn't see anyone in the vehicles themselves. Neither car appeared to be damaged either. Weird. Maybe the owners had car problems and had hitched a ride back to town until a tow truck could come and retrieve the vehicles. I couldn't really give much better of a guess than that, so I continued on, not wanting to rubberneck any more than I already had. The darkness at this point had become rather oppressive. I noticed that outside of my beams of light it was now just a solid black wall, like it just cut off immediately with no glow or anything. I had to slow my speed to half just to be safe. While trying my best to stay on the road, I must have completely forgotten about the construction zone, for when an orange pylon appeared out of the darkness, I hit the brakes. I must have missed the warning signs due to this weird blackout, but this had to have been the start of the construction zone. With due diligence I crawled through the area, trying to catch sight of any workers or really any signs of life. That was when I realized that there should have been some kind of life around here. I had already seen their lights on further back down the road, but now as I drove through, there wasn't a single piece of equipment that seemed to be turned on in any way. Excavators sat abandoned, doors wide open without an operator inside. Any floodlights had been knocked over or otherwise turned off in some other manner. However, things quickly went south from there. About halfway through was when I saw someone finally. A prone body lay face down on the side of the road, only half of the person visible from my car. I stopped the vehicle, wondering what he was doing at first, as it looked like he had his ear to the ground. Eventually I realized that he must have been unconscious, so I put the car in park, turning on my phone's flashlight and the car interior light before getting out to add as much extra light as I could to the area. The moment I stepped out of the car I could feel a very stark difference in the air. It was supposed to be the middle of the summer, yet I could almost see my breath. It was freezing out here for some reason. Hey buddy, you okay? I called out nervously, voice holding an odd echo to it that had no right to be there. I shined my flashlight over him as I got closer before quickly stumbling back. Jesus Christ! I practically sprinted back to my car, throwing myself inside and slamming the door behind me. Panicking to find the lock button, my fingers hit it and I tried to stop myself from hyperventilating. The lower half of that man's body had been eaten. Past his stomach was nothing more than bits of gore and viscera that had been strewn out across the road. It looked like something had just ripped into him and left the rest to rot. I pulled out my phone and tried to call 911, but I had no bars. I must have been too far out to get any signal. It wasn't like I could do anything to help the poor man from here, so I pulled the car out of park and continued out of the construction site. I spotted a few more bodies in varying condition as I tried to make my way out. That was when I saw it. Just as I turned a corner, my headlights illuminated something that was hunched over another construction worker. It almost looked like a person, but it was far too dark. It was incredibly thin, spine jutting out from its back as it initially faced away. When it turned in response to the light, it covered its malformed face with a massive hand that ended in sharp ragged claws, pinprick white eyes glaring at me from the shadows of its hand as it let out a shriek and bounded off into the darkness. At that point I slammed my foot down on the gas and floored it out of there, having to swerve once or twice to avoid the abandoned equipment. Eventually, I rocketed out of the site going far too fast, but unable to slow down. In my rear-view mirror I could see them, a collection of white eyes that trailed along behind me in the distance. They didn't make any sound, but I could tell they were getting closer little by little. I must have had at least some luck tonight, as when I made my way over the next hill I could see off in the distance a gas station that was still lit up, a beacon of light in this sea of darkness that surrounded me. I managed to get to it in only a few minutes, my tires screeching across the pavement as I came to a halt directly under the gas area. The darkness was like a wall all around it, but I had a clear path to get inside of the building. Taking a deep breath, I escaped my vehicle and sprinted up to the glass door. When I got to it, the attendant inside was already unlocking it and pressing a button on the side to power it on, letting it open enough to get me in before he closed it again with the lock in place. "Are you all right?" he asked me as I stumbled away from the door, trying to put distance between me and the numerous windows that covered the front wall of the station. I felt vulnerable, there in that little store, the panes of glass being the only thing between us and all that darkness outside just waiting for the lights to go out. I started to try and explain to him what I had seen, when outside the bulbs began to blow one by one around the top of the gas station, with the darkness encroaching closer and closer until it was pressed up against the windows. The light that was inside didn't seem to faze it at all now. Almost as soon as it had reached the glass I could see them again, small sets of white eyes dipping in and out of the darkness. "What the fuck is going on?" the attendant cried in a panic as he too backed away from the glass. That was when we saw the first crack appear on the window, the tip of a clawed hand pressing into the glass as it singed underneath the bits of light that reached. "I don't know, just help me barricade this," I shouted back to him before shoving the shelves towards the front of the store. The glass held long enough for us to get a sort of half-wall set up, but I knew it wouldn't hold them back forever. Turning to him I asked, "Is there a security room or somewhere else we can go to hide in here?" He nodded, saying, "In the back room. It's small but should fit us both." We got into the security room and shut the door, sliding the heavy lock into place before settling in. The room was small but well illuminated, a row of 6 TV screens showing different camera angles from around the building. 4 of them were completely blacked out with only 2 left that were inside the store itself. One was positioned in the main lobby and the second was pointed just outside our door. Only a few minutes after we had entered the security room did the front windows shatter. We only got to see a couple of seconds, but we watched the shelves get pushed aside and the inside go completely black. Now all of the cameras were dark, and when the single bulb above us started to flicker I turned on my phone's flashlight just in case. Luckily the power didn't go out in this room, at least, the door being sealed along the bottom as well, so there wasn't any cracks for whatever this thing was to filter in through. We sat there in silence for a time, neither of us brave enough to break it in fear of attracting unwanted attention. That silence broke at the first sound of scratching, which eventually led to a chorus of low whispers just outside of our door. They sounded just like normal people, and if it wasn't for what I had already seen I might have thought that we were being rescued. But their voices were too low, and underneath their pleas for us to come out I could get that sense of danger just on the edges of it. Like if we didn't comply there would be consequences. I don't know how long we were forced to sit there and listen to the scratching and whispers. The TV monitors would come on though one by one as the darkness seemed to recede, the sky a pool of red and orange that signaled sunrise. We waited until the sun was well above the horizon before opening the door slowly and taking our first steps outside. The store was trashed, glass everywhere along with what looked like hundreds of footprints that had trampled across the merchandise. My car appeared untouched and I got it running again after the police arrived to aid the attendant. I still don't know what I saw that night. I don't think I ever will. But I think that's for the best, as there are some things that should probably stay in their darkness. Story 5. Something has been walking my street at night. My name is John Waters. Recently I had a change in place of work that required me to commute an hour and a half one way. At first I didn't mind the drive, but then over the course of the next few months it began to be something that I found myself dreading. This being the case, I kept my eyes open for any houses or apartments that I could afford in the area. That's when I stumbled upon a very nice house that happened to be in the local mill village. I was hesitant at first, but the price was unheard of. I booked an appointment with the realtor and a few days later I met with her at the house. I made sure to arrive a little early so I could explore the exterior of the property unsupervised. The house was beautiful and so was the rest of the neighborhood. All of the houses were well kept, much unlike most other mill villages that typically fell apart once their mill had shut down. I walked around the house admiring the yard and all the plants along with it. The siding had a new coat of paint and the yard appeared to have been recently landscaped. This house was clearly worth more than they were asking. I knew there had to be a catch and that this was too good to be true. As I walked back around to the front of the house I noticed one of the homeowners next door out watering in his yard. He was turned toward me with a blank look on his face. Realizing that this could be my neighbor soon, I decided to be friendly and waved at him with a smile. He hesitantly held up his hand to wave and gave me a half smile in return. There was an odd look in his eyes that gave me some discomfort. I noticed that he wasn't actually watering anything. The hose pointed straight up and the steady steam of water poured onto his concrete driveway. I frowned at the sight of this, but my attention was taken away by the sound of tires on the pavement as the realtor pulled in. The realtor gave me the grand tour, talking up every amenity that would be included in the sale. I have to give her credit though, she was very good at what she did. I was in awe at every room. When the tour was over, we sat down on the perfectly staged couch in the living room and negotiated the price. I got right to it and asked her what the catch was for the price being so low in such a nice neighborhood. Her eyes slightly opened wider but she immediately regained her composure. She stumbled over her words when she told me that most people give mill villages a negative connotation and that makes them hard to sell. I slowly nodded and found myself considering the possibility of being stuck at that house with no resale value. I think she noticed my hesitation because she was overly quick to tell me that if I signed the papers today she could knock off an additional $5,000. I should have questioned it. I should have thought it through. I should have weighed all my options, yet it was such a good deal that I knew I couldn't pass up. I signed the papers without any further questions. After the closing process, I started early in the morning and got all of my things moved in and made the place look like home by the end of the day. I ate some pizza, had a few beers, and went out to the front porch to watch the sunset. I looked around and saw people working in their gardens and kids playing in the yards. It was all so nice. I noticed the door of the house across the street opened up to reveal an older lady with a pie in her hands. She waved at me with a huge smile as she crossed the street into my yard. I greeted her and told her my name, hers was Anne. I received the pie from her as a welcome to the neighborhood, and we both sat down on my front porch and got to know each other. She was cheerful and frankly just a happy person. The smile that she wore seemed to never leave her face. Then the sun went down, and looked up at the now darkened sky and immediately shot up from her chair. I thought it odd and asked if everything was all right. All she told me was that she had to go clean her house. At this time of night? And the way she moved so quickly caused me to believe otherwise. As I watched her descend the porch steps, I noticed that she wasn't the only one going inside. People stopped gardening and kids stopped playing. Everyone was heading inside their homes. And stopped halfway across the street to turn back to me. She told me that no matter what, never open my door after midnight. I started to respond but before I could she had already made her way across the street and into her house. She slammed her front door, and just like that I was their only one remaining outside. I briefly stood there dumbfounded before I headed inside and locked the doors. I had no idea what to make of all this, and to be completely honest it was freaking me out. I told myself that I was just imagining things and was probably just a little off in the head. I knew I needed to get my mind off of it all, so I took some sleeping pills and watched some TV on the couch until I dozed off. At 1:38 a.m. I woke up to scratching on the front door. I quickly sat up on the couch as I heard it once more. My stomach sank to depths of which I had never felt before. My mind was racing back to all that had happened the day before. I crept over to the front window and did my best to discreetly peer through the blinds at the door. Nothing but the soft glow of the streetlights. Then I heard the scratching coming from the back door. I felt like I was going to throw up, but held it back in an attempt to not make a single noise. The scratching had ceased, but I still crouched on the living room floor for what seemed like hours to make sure the coast was clear. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. The next few weeks went by a lot more smoothly. After not hearing any more noises in the night, I chalked it up to just being some raccoons looking for a free meal. It was so convenient only being 10 minutes away from work and made my life a hell of a lot less stressful. I made new friends in the area and had more free time to go out and have fun. Everything was great until last night. I had been out late at a friend's house and didn't start heading home until about 1 a.m. I neglected to watch the time and, truthfully, it didn't bother me anymore. When I turned the corner to my street, it was as dead as usual. I noticed that as I pulled into my driveway, the neighbors were poking their heads through their curtains, watching my every move. I looked down at my phone and pulled up messages to text my friend letting him know I made it safely home. When I looked up, it was in my headlights, staring at me through the windshield. Words cannot describe the horror that I felt from what stood there in front of my car. It looked like a man, yet slightly more elongated. Its shoulders were hunched forward, leading down to fingers twice as long as anything human. Sharp, pointed claws grew out from its fingertips and it repeatedly extended and retracted them as though it were some kind of tick. Its skin was a pale gray that looked as though rubber were stretched over its bones. Its eyes were solid black where normally there would be white, with tiny, bright yellow pupils in the center. It took a step forward, stretching its long and bony legs, claws digging into the ground. I panicked and threw my car into drive and floored the gas. I must have hit the creature with a good amount of force because it flew back a few feet before landing on the grass and taking off into the woods. The neighbor next to me, the one with the hose, opened his door and rushed to my car. He grabbed me and we both sprinted into my house and slammed the door behind us, locking it up tight. I sank down to the floor with my back against the wall, attempting to catch my breath. My neighbor held out his hand to shake mine and said his name was Frank. I asked him what the fuck that thing was. He said that no one knows, but real late at night that thing walks the streets, looking for any living thing that still remained outside. For reasons unknown it has never broken into anyone's house, so it has become common knowledge around here to shut and lock your door every single night after sundown. When the first sighting started happening, the people of the Mill Village gathered together and decided that getting the police involved would be useless and only cause more problems. No one had been killed so far, but there was no doubt that the creature had sinister intentions for the townsfolk. Frank even said that pets would go missing here and there, most of them never to be seen again. The ones that did come back, though, never acted the same afterwards. I asked him why he was staring at me the day that I came to look at the house, and he said that he was just shocked to see someone new move in. Apparently no one new had moved into the Mill Village in over 20 years. Frank and I talked until the sun came up this morning. It was comforting having someone else around to experience all of this with. I didn't go into work today. I didn't even call in. I was paranoid and in shock from the horror I had witnessed last night. I sat on the couch in front of the TV all day long, unable to think of anything else. How could these people just accept that thing being out there, stalking the streets at night? The sun began to go down, so I grabbed the baseball bat that I kept by the front door for defense. I sat on the floor facing the front door, not taking my eyes off of it for a single second. Around 12:30 a.m. I heard the awful sound of a man screaming coming from outside. I shuddered at the thought of some poor bastard out there, possibly getting eaten alive by that thing. Around 1 a.m. my eyelids became rather heavy due to lack of sleep from the night before. I tried to keep my focus on the front door, but it was no use. I fell asleep. There were 3 knocks at the door. I opened my eyes and laid there, hoping it was part of a dream that I was having. 3 more knocks at the door. At this point my heart was racing. I pulled out my phone to look at the time. 3:20 a.m. I crawled over to the front window, peered out, and let out a huge sigh of relief. It was Frank. I opened the door, grabbed him by the shoulders to pull him inside, and locked the door once again. I asked him what the hell he was doing out there and was alarmed when I did not receive an answer. I examined him up and down and noticed that he looked a bit pale. I began to ask if he was okay, but was interrupted by a loud crunching noise. It was coming from Frank. I watched in absolute horror as his fingertips burst apart, making way for even longer, gray fingertips. The skin on his arms and legs stretched to the point that it started tearing in a patternless and blood-filled manner. His face stretched apart and tore in places that revealed eyes as black as death itself. Before the thing could finish bursting from its shell that was once Frank, I was able to run with all the sanity I had left into my bedroom. I hid in my closet and barricaded the doors shut from the inside. It is now 3:36 a.m. I can hear it crashing throughout my house. It's getting closer. I am telling this, not as a cry for help, for I fear that it is too late for me, but as a warning for all of you. Stay inside at night. Lock the doors. And most importantly, don't open your door for anyone after midnight. Story 6. Every night a child wakes me up. Daddy. I'm in a dreamless sleep, but I hear the word. The significance of the word escapes me. I'm exhausted. It's been months since I've had a full night's sleep. Daddy, it calls again. The word is louder now. The voice behind the word is worried and a little scared. I'm just awake enough to know that I need to wake up. I open my eyes and try to convince myself that I'm dreaming, but I know I'm not. Every night this child wakes me up. Where I sleep doesn't matter. Outdoors, hotels, hospitals, the location makes no difference at all. Somehow, she finds me. Daddy. It's a little girl's voice, high and shrill, and she's scared. Just a second, I call back. The routine is the same every night, but it doesn't get easier. How could it? How could this ever be normal? I sit up in bed and reach for my glasses. Then I stop. No glasses. It's easier if I can't see the details. I'm coming, I call again and slide into my slippers. For the 100th time, I ask, why is this my responsibility? Why did she choose me? I am not her father. I'm not anyone's father. My thoughts are still undisciplined, and for a moment, I think about the child's mother. It's too much. It's just too much. I feel cold. I start to shake. The shake progresses to heaving shudders, and I don't try to fight it. It's easier if my body has this time to convulse. I let my body have this small moment of rebellion before I force it to stand. My body is numb, and I am thankful. Diligently, I place one foot in front of the other. My legs are heavy. Head down, I have to focus on my steps to not fall. There is pressure in the back of my head, and that means she can see me. I raise my head. I am standing in the doorway of my guest room. The door is open, as usual. The lamp beside the bed is on, as usual. The figure is in the center of the bed, holding a stuffed bunny, as usual. I kept calling, and you didn't come, the figure says. I have a hard time waking up, I say, and force myself to walk into the room. What time is it? 312, she says. The shrill of fear has gone from her voice, and I am thankful. I've started to think of it as she. It has a little girl's voice, high, piercing, and innocent in a way that I can't explain. How long have I thought of it as a girl? I bend down and squint at the bedside clock. 3:12, I say. 3:12, she repeats. I get that wrong sometimes. It takes practice. I'm sure you will get it, I say and smile down at the child. She trills happily and hugs her stuffed bunny. Are you warm enough? Yes. Would you like me to get you some water? No. My throat goes rough as I ask, is it time to go to mommy's room? Yes, she says from behind her bunny. I force myself to hold out my hand, and cool smooth scales press gently into my palm. Then I stifle a shudder as innumerable scaled tendrils wrap themselves around my wrist and forearm. The child's form writhes as it raises from the bed. I can see the movement, but the details are blurry, and I am thankful. Could you turn on the light? She asks when we enter the hallway. Her request is so genuine it surprises me. How could something like her be afraid of the dark? I turn on the hallway light and briefly wonder if I should purchase a flashlight for her. We walk. The child is silent. Her current form conceals much of her sharp edges and power, but occasionally a claw or a spine grazes against my leg. She is coiled and prepared to attack. It's all right. We are almost there, I try to reassure her, but her grip still tightens on my arm. We find ourselves in the kitchen. The pull of gravity is less here, and I adjust my steps into a shuffle. We are close to mommy's door. The door to mommy's room is in a different location every night. The basement, the linen closet, the couch, and a filing cabinet have all been doors to mommy's room. The shape of the door does not matter. The door has been broad, narrow, crooked, or straight. It has been curved or flat. When the door is curved or spherical, I close my eyes. It's easier that way. This night the door to mommy's room is in the pantry. The ceiling, the food, and the walls are gone, but the floor remains. We walk forward and stand in the middle of a galaxy, my kitchen visible through the aperture of the pantry door. I remind myself that it was good that I didn't bring my glasses as I stand in the center of a blurry night sky. I feel the mother's presence. Large tentacled masses distort the light around us. The mother is a titan, a force that existed before gods, and her child is holding my hand. The child's hold loosens, and I prepare myself for what comes next. I will my muscles to relax as she wraps her small sinuous form around me in a sharp hug. She is home, and I am thankful. Good night, Daddy. She says as she peels her many limbs away from me. Good night, little one, I reply. She hands me her bunny and floats towards a writhing mass of stars. I stand watch until she joins her mother. The stars fade, and I am now in the pantry surrounded by spices and cleaning supplies. I feel gravity return. I step too quickly and stumble back into the kitchen. My legs shake, and I steady myself by grasping the counter. It's just too much. I scream until I'm out of breath. Then, I return to the guest room. I place the bunny on the bed and tuck it in. The child will want it when she returns. My responsibility is over for the night. Tomorrow, she will wake me. I will comfort her and turn on the lights and help her be brave. Then we will walk to mommy's room, and she will leave me. We will do this again and again, night after night, until I can no longer wake up.